Hello my friends and welcome back to another Baldur's Gate 3 character building guide. Hope you're doing well. Today we're covering one of the most powerful burst damage characters in the entire game. This character is designed to one-shot enemies before they ever have a chance to react, appearing from the shadows and deleting enemies instantly and without mercy because the amount of damage that you put out right at the beginning of combat is so incredibly high, and you do it all from the safety of guaranteed surprise and stealth, meaning that your enemies will never get a chance to react to you. This character, I think, fits very well for Minthara as a Paladin, but also, of course, is very good for a Tav build, and will also get incredible conversation skills, so will make a great party face, as well as provide a ton of utility to your party through skills. It also bypasses a lot of the downsides of Paladin because it has brings a lot of utility to the table, and doesn't need specific items or elixirs or anything like that in order to shine, so it is much easier to fit into a lot of party makeups because it won't require any specific items from your other characters if they might be needing those themselves. Before I begin, I do want to take a moment to say thank you so much to Bruce Flying Solo for the $20 donation, Caillou Teletub for the $5, Commentariist for the €12 donation, Fancy and Wonder for the $15, and Zach Shore for becoming a channel member. Thank you so much, my friends. I really do appreciate the support. It really means a lot. And I really cannot express enough how much it means to me for that people like these videos so much. All right. Let's get in and start building this character. So this character was inspired a little bit by my multi-classing tier list, which I just recently put up, and it uses a somewhat unusual combination of classes that you won't see combined very often in order to create a character that has incredible burst damage and brings a ton of utility from both of those classes in order to make a deadly combat character that also can act as your party face and cover all the skills that your party needs, or almost all of the skills that your party needs brought to the table. We're going to begin, therefore, by taking a level of Rogue. This gets us excellent skill proficiencies and also gives us access to a lot of extra power for our character, and will play very strongly into what we're trying to do as we level the character up. So for our Rogue build here, we are going to be using primarily Paladin levels, but Rogue is going to fill a very important role for this character, so we're going to begin with it because when you begin with Rogue, you get all of the awesome skill proficiencies and stuff that Rogue provides. The one downside is that we won't get heavy armor, but this character is going to operate in stealth all the time, so you probably want to be in light or medium armor anyways, so medium armor proficiency will be totally sufficient for this character. We are going to take a pretty standard Rogue stat split, actually, of 16-16, and then we'll drop Intelligence here, take 12 Wisdom, and we'll take 14 Charisma. This will allow us to have pretty high Charisma skills, which we can use for our conversation skills, so we're going to end up with actually pretty solid conversation skills, and of course, because we are going to be a Paladin, having high Charisma will let us improve our saving throws and other Paladin abilities that scale off of Charisma. For our skill selection here, this character is very flexible, like all characters that start with initial levels in Rogue. You can have it fill basically any role in your party. But the great thing that it brings you is sleight of hand expertise, so you're never going to fail a lockpicking check. And then you can also definitely take expertise in persuasion if you really want to be sure that you're going to pass more dialogue skills, or expertise in stealth if you plan to make a lot of stealth checks. Generally speaking, just having proficiency in stealth is enough for this character unless you're planning to use it with greater invisibility, and this is one of the characters that abuses greater invisibility the best in the entire game, so if that's a plan for your party that you have, then you probably want stealth expertise, but I'm going to assume that we're going to take persuasion expertise here. For our last remaining skill, you can either fill out a remaining dialogue skill. Deception and Persuasion are probably the two best, although Paladins do get some unique intimidation options, so you could take that instead. You could pick up Insight, because this character will end up with reasonable insight, or you could put this extra skill point somewhere else. Acrobatics is a reasonable option defensively, but you are almost always going to be hidden in combat, so it's rare that you'll actually get shoved. And we'll have decent dexterity to resist shoves anyways. So my advice is going to be to put this in one of the dialogue skills that you think you might need. like insight, deception, or deception in this case, but any of those options are good, and it will depend a little bit on what else you have covered in your party and what you want to do with this character. Another thing that I should mention is this character does benefit very strongly from having Ethel's hair. So if you're planning to use Ethel's hair on this character, then you just want to take 10 wisdom and 17 dexterity so that you can hit 18 with just the hair and only need a single feat to hit 20 dex. Alright, that's level 1. Let's go to level 2. At level 2, we're going to take a Paladin level, and that gets us medium armor and shield proficiency. And something that's kind of nice about this character is you get to have shield and medium armor proficiency on a dex-based character. So even though you might be a little bit lower health than a monoclass Paladin, because we took rogue levels, so we'll have a fewer HP, you're actually even tankier than most Paladin builds because you max your dexterity, so you're going to have very high ACs and initiatives, and we get to have medium armor and use the uncapped medium armors, the ones that don't have a cap on how much dexterity you can apply, to reach extremely high AC values, so this character will actually be very hard to hit. Your subclass actually doesn't matter that much. I'm going to go with Oath of Vengeance because it's on flavor for Minthara, of course, and I think it adds some really nice things to this character. But Oath of the Ancients Paladin for a more defensively oriented character, more defensively oriented version of this character would be pretty reasonable as well. Oath of Vengeance gives you the additional Inquisitor's Might damage, which in the early game is not huge, but dazing enemies is pretty nice, and, 2 damage is 2 damage, and when you're stacking hundreds of damage in a turn, every little bit can help bring you over the threshold to drop an enemy in a single attack rather than in 2 attacks. And what you really care about when you're caring about damage is how many attacks, how many actions does it translate to per enemy death. People often, I think, get really interested in damage per round, but the real metric that you should be considering when you're looking at damage characters is slain enemies per round, because that's what actually translates to winning combat. So really high single burst damage is in some ways less important than just reaching the threshold, or really high damage is less important than reaching the thresholds that you need to one-shot enemies. So we really want to be looking to ways that we can exactly reach the damage threshold that we need to kill specific enemies in combat. Even small amounts of damage can help us do that. Of course, you have your Oath of Vengeance tenets, but that shouldn't be too hard to live by for Minthara, so let's go to the next level. And at Paladin level 2, you get smite attacks. Now, this obviously is going to be a core component of our burst damage setup here, so our smites are going to let us add initially only 2d8 of damage, but plus the 1d6 of sneak attack damage, and so whenever we get sneak attack on an enemy, you are going to be able to output your weapon damage, and the 2d8 plus 1d6 of damage to any enemy, which is already quite a lot of burst damage from a smite attack. Of course, I should mention as well, this is a dexterity build, so you need to use a finesse weapon, any weapon marked finesse, in order to attack with your paladin. You won't be using a greatsword or a warhammer or something like that. We're going to be using a dagger or short sword or any other weapon marked finesse in order to get sneak attack, smites, and use our dexterity to attack. For our fighting style, there's actually 2 choices here that both make a lot of sense and will work depending on exactly what you want to do with this character and how you want to gear them, what other items you need for the rest of your party, and so on, and what specific items you've actually got in your party setup. Either defense or dueling are very good for this character. If you know you're going to use a shield and only 1 weapon, then you want dueling because that just gives you an additional 2 damage, and you'll get more AC with that setup than you will with defense. But this character, because you can smite and sneak attack with offhand attacks, with bonus action attacks, you can also take defense style and just use 2 weapons, and you will end up with very high damage output as a result. To reach the highest possible first turn burst damage, you want to be wielding 2 weapons. I think that in general, you're going to end up going with a shield slightly more often, but also one of the great things about defense is that it's flexible. You can take defense fighting style and still use a shield, and you'll get even higher AC, slightly lower damage, but even higher AC, or if you have 2 weapons that you want to use, you can have defense fighting style and still have relatively high AC. Paladins, unfortunately, don't get access to 2 weapon fighting style, so you won't get that. You won't get your dex mod on your offhand attack, but the dex mod is only a small portion of the damage that we're doing anyways. It's mostly going to come from sneak attack and smite damage, and you can smite on offhand attacks, so it's going to be worthwhile to make those offhand attacks anyways in order to hit very high burst damage. For prepared spells at this level, we just want spells that are situational. You're going to spend almost all of your spell slots on smites, so it's not something that you're not going to actually cast any of these spells that often. And with only 14 charisma, you definitely do not want to be using spells like command that have save DCs associated with them, because the enemies will just always make their saving throws. Your DCs just won't be high enough. So my recommendation is to take spells that you might want in some circumstances, like Protection from Good and Evil can be very good in certain encounters. Most of the time you're going to use this as a smite attack, but you can use it to overcome certain encounters by making yourself immune to Charm and Frightened. Bless is always good, and if you just need to hit more often, Bless is great. Thunderous Smite is a little bit of additional damage. You can do a Thunderous Smite attack and a normal Smite attack in the same attack, and even though the save DC won't be very high, sometimes it's better to sacrifice 2 average damage compared to a level 1 Smite for the possible chance of knocking the enemy prone. And then finally, you can go with something like Shield of Faith here, because Shield of Faith actually will let you'll relatively easily maintain concentration on this all day, because you'll have very high AC, so you won't be taking damage. So if you really want to make this character tanky, you can concentrate on Shield of Faith on itself. And there's some benefits that you can get from illithid powers or from items for concentrating on spells. The fact that this is an all-day concentration spell lets you trigger those at the cost of only a level 1 spell slot, meaning that you can have the Strange Conduit Ring or the Concentrated Blast powers going off much more easily without having to spend resources on the spell that you're concentrating on. And Shield of Faith just isn't that bad as a spell anyways. Normally you're going to use these as smite attacks, as always with Paladin builds. You're going to spend most of your spell slots on smites, but it's nice to have the options when you want them. Paladin level 3, we get access to Vow of Enmity, which is actually pretty nice for a rogue build, because it's going to let us trigger sneak attack more often. Now, our sneak attack is only 1d6, so it's not something that we're going to put a lot of effort into. Most of the time, you'd rather spend your bonus action on the offhand attack, but Vow of Enmity is currently bugged in Baldur's Gate 3. You can cast it on yourself and gain advantage on all enemies for the duration of the Vow of Enmity, and you can do this before combat starts and just have advantage on every attack in the combat, and that means that not only will you have advantage, so you'll just be landing your attacks more often, you'll also trigger sneak attack every turn, which is pretty useful. Hunter's Mark is also very good for this character as well. If you know a fight is going to go long, you can cast Hunter's Mark on the main enemy in a fight, and because you're likely making offhand attacks, you're triggering the Hunter's Mark multiple times per turn, and just getting a lot of additional damage out of this. And since we'll be having advantage on a lot of attacks, and thanks to being either in stealth or just using Vow of Enmity, we're going to get a lot of critical hits, and this build is going to be designed around enabling critical hits, of course, and the critical hit damage will double our Hunter's Mark damage. When you're doing 4d6 of extra damage with your main hand attack and offhand attack, both criticling on Hunter's Mark, it's a lot of additional damage, and starts to rival the damage output of smites in only a single turn. So often in the later game, it will be better to use Hunter's Mark than a level 1 smite in order to generate the most possible damage. No particular changes to our prepared spells. We've already got all the ones that we might ever cast at this point. Paladin level 4, we get a feat, and we're just going to increase our dexterity, so we have higher ACs and initiative and hit more often. You'll hit 20 dexterity if you have Ethel's hair at this point and started with 17, then you'll hit 20 and be maxed out, and that's obviously great. And at Paladin level 5, we get extra attack and level 2 smite spells, which are, of course, a massive boost to our damage. Extra attack means that we can smite up to 3 times per round if we're using an offhand weapon, and that is enough to delete just about every enemy in the game at this point, of course, although it does cost a lot of resources. This character, because it's a Paladin build, is relatively hungry for long rests, so that is something that you are going to need to keep in mind. But because we are going to get a lot of extra damage just from our attacks, that don't rely on smites, you will often be able to conserve smites in easier combats so that your character can go longer, in ways that a normal Paladin build might not be able to do. Of course, Misty Step is an incredible spell to get from your Paladin Oath. Again, you won't use this that often because you're going to be spending spell slots on smites mostly, but it's always great to have in an emergency. And for our prepared spells, we get to add another couple situational spells, like Protection from Poison, Lesser Restoration, and Aid. All of these can be useful in some circumstances. And again, with Paladin spells, what you're looking for is ones that are just situationally useful, because the default action with a spell is so good, you just want spells that solve certain problems for you, rather than spells that are generically good, because a generically good spell is never going to compete with a smite. Smite is just generically better than generically good spells, but situationally powerful spells can really solve certain problems that you might run into. Then, now that we've gotten level 2 smites and extra attack, we have gotten a lot of what we needed from Paladin at this point, and so we're going to dip back into Rogue. Rogue gives us, at level 2, gives us a bunch of things that we really want for our Paladin. Bonus action hides means that we're going to almost always be able to make our attack and then hide again. Bonus action dashes can help us move around the field, and Paladins are very hungry for mobility. As an only melee class, of course, you need to get to the enemies to hit them, and bonus action dashes will allow you to do that. But also this enables a hit and run style where you can attack an enemy and then dash away, force the remaining enemies to move towards you on their turn, because you're now 60 feet away from them, and then you can do the same thing again. Especially in combination with bonus movement speed if you're, for example, a Wood Elf, or have Longstrider cast on you, which you always should on every character, then you're going to be able to use these bonus action dashes in order to traverse the battlefield with extreme ease. The bonus action disengage won't come up that often for this character, because if you get into melee with someone, they probably die. But it is useful occasionally, and definitely worth keeping in mind for when you might want it. Mostly, though, the play pattern here is going to be attack from stealth, delete one enemy, and then hide again, forcing the enemies to run around searching for you, and then you do the same thing on the next turn. Then, at Rogue level 3, we get to really take this build up a notch, because we get to take Assassin Rogue. Assassin Rogue gives us 3 amazing class features for us. First up, we have automatic advantage on attack rolls against enemies that haven't taken a turn yet. This is really good because, of course, it triggers our sneak attack, which is now up to 2d6, because we're level 3 Rogue. And Paladins love advantage, because they love higher chances of critical hits. Then, we have guaranteed critical hits against surprised enemies. Paladins love critical hits because it doubles your damage. At this point, we have level 2 smites, and we have level 2 sneak attack. So, in an initial burst damage turn in combat, we can make 2 main hand attacks and an offhand attack with level 2 smites and at least 1 sneak attack die, all of which are guaranteed critical hits for initial burst damage in the mid-200s at level 8, which is an incredibly high amount of damage for this level. Finally, we also get our action and bonus action back at the start of combat, meaning that we can make these attacks before combat starts. You can either initiate with this character or initiate with another character while this character is in hiding, make their attacks, and then when they get rolled into initiative, they get their action back, which effectively works like Action Surge. Action Surge is an incredible ability for a Paladin because it just lets you increase your burst damage massively at the start of combat, and Paladins are all about bursting down threatening enemies before they get a turn. And so this gives you both guaranteed critical hits and sort of action surge at home, where you are able to, as long as you surprise the enemies, as long as you initiate the fight with this character, you are able to make 2 main hand attacks, both of which are for 2 attacks, since you're a level 5 Paladin, before combat starts, giving you effectively a huge boost to your initial damage output. This means that at the beginning of combat, you're going to be able to make 5 attacks before the enemies get a turn, several of which will have guaranteed critical hits if you surprise the enemy, and several of which will be smites. You'll get sneak attack on on one of those attacks as well, meaning that you can output insane damage before the enemies ever have a chance to act. Then they're going to be wasting their turn because they're surprised, and you get another 3 attacks after that with your offhand dagger plus your 2 main hand attacks. At that point, if you've used smites, you've burnt through a lot of your smites, but some of those you'll be conserving smites on, and at that point, every enemy in the encounter that you care about should be dead. Now that we've gotten that incredible burst damage from Rogue, we go back to Paladin, and we get the Aura of Protection, which gives us a +2 to our saving throws, as well as boosting all our allies' saving throws if we're near them. And one of the great things about this is it works even if you're stealthed, so you can be in stealth near an ally and still giving them the aura. The enemies won't be able to target you because you're stealthed, but your allies will still be benefiting from the aura. The aura is +2 to your saving throws, which is pretty relevant at this point and gives you very high +3 wisdom. So one of the downsides of Rogue is that they will often fail wisdom saves if they happen to get targeted. This character won't, because we have 12 wisdom and the Paladin aura, or at least won't as often. Paladin level 7, we get Relentless Avenger, which is not that relevant. Like I said, if an enemy is in your melee range, they're almost certainly dying anyways, so the chances of you making opportunity attacks with this character are not that high, but it's a nice bonus when it does come up. And at Paladin level 8, we get another feat. There are 2 options for the feat here. You can either just increase your dexterity to 20, which is always a great option, if you've already got 20 dexterity, or just want to see really big numbers all the time, and you will get higher average damage if you do this. You can take Savage Attacker. This character rolls so many dice, because we have smite attacks, we have sneak attacks, we roll additional dice because we have the dice from our weapons, and of course we're going to be stacking everything that rolls additional damage dice on our character. Re-rolling the dice and using the highest result is going to give us a +20 or so average damage per attack when we're using smites and sneak attacks and so on. And so Savage Attacker is just going to be incredible value for this character, and I do recommend taking it. Even if you aren't using Ethel's Hair, stopping at 18 dex and taking Savage Attacker is going to be enough more damage that I think it's worth it. But if you really don't like not hitting 20 dexterity, you won't be punished by not taking Savage Attacker. It just is very good for this character. And then finally at Paladin level 9, we get level 3 spells, including Haste. And we get to add in a couple more great situational spells for this character. One that I think is actually really worth keeping in mind is Warden of Vitality. But you can use this character to pass out bonus action heals, if that's something that you need. Again, this will come up extremely rarely, but sometimes you just need a bunch of healing in an encounter, or you need to keep NPCs alive, something like that. And Warden of Vitality can be very useful in that case. And then Daylight also comes up occasionally. Remove Curse can come up sometimes. These are all relatively unlikely to happen. You're mostly using these spell slots for smites, but that is something that you can do as well. Another variant that I should mention is we got most of what we wanted from Paladin with 5 levels. We could take 4 levels of a spellcasting class to get slightly more spell slots. Something like Sorcerer we could take 4 levels of and get a other utility spells. I like just going to 9 Paladin because it keeps your hit points high, and you still hit 3rd level spells. You get all the Paladin auras and stuff while still hitting 2 feats. But that is definitely an option available to you. You could also go to Rogue 4 and take 3 levels of a casting class. There's a couple variants to this build, but this one's very clean and is just a really nice split because Paladins often like to stop at 9 anyways. Rogues really like to stop at 3, so this is just a level split that I think works really well for this character. So, when you put it all together, your character in the initial turns of combat is going to be able to sneak attack for 2d6, smite for 4d8 with a level 3 smite, plus any additional damage dice that you do, and you can do that up to 5 times before combat starts, thanks to the action refresh from Assassin Rogue. You also get to, if you're playing Minthara specifically, you get to add her bonus damage from her soul branding, which is an additional 2d4 damage. Those are also multiplied by the guaranteed critical hits, and so you're going to be doing even more massive damage at the beginning of combat. This character really gets to focus in on doing one overpoweringly devastating attack at the beginning of combat and just crush your enemies. You can also power it up even more with items, so let's talk about those. The best items for this character are, you want a finesse weapon, of course, so just anything marked with finesse, which you can see here, it's marked with finesse, because this will allow you to use your dexterity, sneak attack, and smite all in one. And, of course, a weapon like the Knife of the Undermountain King that increases your critical hit damage and that increases your critical hit chance is really good. While you do have guaranteed crits on this character, even more critical hits is never bad, so critical hit gear is really good for this character. You're going to want one of the medium armors that doesn't have capped dexterity, like the Yuan-Ti Scale Mail or the Armor of Agility, because that will have you able to make stealth checks as well as have very high AC. If you take... If you use a shield, you can reach extremely high AC values of in the mid-20s, depending on what items and gear you have equipped. The Gloves of Dexterity are reasonable for this character if you wanted to hit higher Charisma, and since we only hit 18 Dexterity, you could take those. But I also like any of the sets of gloves that add additional damage dice, like the Infernal Gauntlets, will be very good for this character. An item of special note for you is the Killer's Sweetheart, which, when you kill a creature, your next attack roll is guaranteed to be a critical. Well, you're almost certainly going to critically hit and kill an enemy in the opening round of combat, like your first attack is probably going to kill something, so getting another guaranteed critical is awesome on this character. And of course, illithid powers like the Luck of the Far Realms. Oh, forgetting where that is. This one, there we go. Illithid powers, where the Luck of the Far Realms, allow you to get guaranteed critical hits as well. And of course, Minthara comes with illithid powers, so you can make that work. Also, Concentrated Blast is very good for you, so it definitely an option for this character as well. The Strange Conduit Ring adds an additional d4 of psychic damage to this character's attacks if you're concentrating on a spell. So a day-long spell like Shield of Faith, where you can increase your AC, and also get the benefits of the Strange Conduit Ring, are really nice because that again is doubled by critical hits. Although you can also just use Bless or Hunter's Mark in order to trigger it as well. A couple things to note when actually playing this character. One is you should get really used to checking enemy sight lines. So on PC, you hit Shift to do that, and you just want to hide anywhere that you can't be seen by enemies. I don't know exactly what the control is on console. If someone could post it in the comments, let me know. And as long as you don't pass into enemy sight lines, you'll never have to roll a stealth check at all, which will let you start combats off really well. Also, it's very helpful for this character if you have an ally with minor illusion, because then you can turn enemies to face the direction you want, meaning that you're much more easily able to get these melee stealth attacks off. Another thing to keep in mind is that when you are trying to do smites and sneak attack, both with the same character, you have to set both to reaction. So you need to set them to ask when used. Check all these off and have them set on ask. And unfortunately, the game will not allow you to use both as a reaction on the same attack. So if you were to just use an attack roll, it will pop up a thing. Let me just quick save in case this ruins something. But I'll demonstrate this. Sure, we'll do a critical hit. It'll pop up the reaction tab, but it'll only allow you to select one of these. So if we do sneak attack here, it won't let us also smite. But if we select in advance sneak attack or smite as our attacks, so we can select sneak attack. No, let me re-hide here. And then we can trigger smite, and so that way you can get both at once, and we can one-shot Astarion here. So that's without criticals, of course. We were able to kill Astarion in just one attack, doing about 100 damage, and that's without any of our buffs or anything else applied. Alright, my friends, hope you enjoyed this video, and of course, as always, if you have, definitely feel free to leave a comment, like the video. Both of those things help me out a ton with the algorithm, so I appreciate people doing so. And of course, you can subscribe to my channel for more Baldur's Gate 3 build guides and other strategy game content. Cheers, folks. I'll catch you next time.